Welcome to the Roundtable Perspective. I'm your host, Tom Roach, and I'm joined today by my guest, Dr. Emily Sevcik, who is an assistant professor in music therapy at Western Illinois University and also a music therapist and counselor. Thank you for joining me.
I'm very excited to be here today.
I've always found music to be very therapeutic, but I guess you have a different take on that. Tell us what music therapy is for you.
Yeah, music therapy is the use of music by board-certified music therapists to address a variety of clinical needs, ranging from physical to psychological, cognitive, and working to maintain optimal wellness through connection and building a relationship with the therapist through music.
So give me some detail here. I mean, specifically, what might we be doing if we were engaged in music therapy?
Yeah, it can really depend on where you're working, but overall, music therapists apply a variety of music therapy methods ranging from songwriting or compositional, improvisation, receptive, so more listening to music and then responding non-musically to it, like talking about something, or even creating music themselves, like maybe learning how to play and finding new ways to make music within their potential limitations.
So if we were using songwriting, for example, here, and you were working with me, you would encourage me to express myself more through the music, or where does that go?
Potentially, it can depend on what the person's needs are. You know, we can create a whole new song from scratch, something that we recreate the music and all the lyrics. Another kind of common practice is kind of filling in the blank, so we can create different, like my favorite things is kind of a common one. We can fill it in with your favorite things to have means of expressing and making that song your own. It can be a way of, yes, expressing yourself, but maybe feeling some validation of hearing your thoughts back into the song. Yeah.
So someone who maybe writes music and goes to open mic nights, are they're sort of receiving sort of the benefits of this therapy without necessarily having a specific need for it, right? Mm-hmm. But it's something that we all experience.
Definitely. Music is a piece of culture across the world and through time, really, since music has existed. It's been a part of the human experience. Kind of the beauty of music therapy is that music therapists help people to more understand how music has played a role in their lives. It's something we don't always think about. We might go into the store, hear music around us, not always thinking about how it's the response we're having. So with music therapy, we're trying to help people understand how music can play a role in and understand how music's been there in their lives.
So in terms of wellness, right, what kinds of things might I get out of songwriting or playing something that I wrote? How might that impact my sense of well-being?
Yeah, sometimes it's easier to put feelings, thoughts into a creative medium, kind of externalizing it beyond ourselves, whether that be in creating the music or the words and having a space to find new ways to share our ideas. I think it's some of the beauty of really great songwriters who get their music out there, that it's open to new interpretations by each person. A little different when you're doing it for yourself. It's really personalized to exactly your story, your perspective, and it allows you to have a way to kind of take that out of your mind, and put it in something else beyond you. So
the practical effect might be it would help me manage stress, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. That could be a piece of it for somebody.
Yeah, but some of the other applications are, what other things do you deal with?
Yeah, one example I can pull sometimes it's easier to talk about a specific area of need of working with somebody who has dementia or some type of memory loss. A lot of times we'll use a song within their preference kind of range. Music usually from young adulthood is kind of where we tend to start. And then using that song, like going back to my favorite things, singing through it, listening to it, and then having a conversation about some of their favorite things. But there's something different about saying it versus us then singing it back to them. And there's this little smile and spark in their eye that you heard me and now it's in a song, and just how neat that is to have your idea put into something other than the everyday speech.
Yeah, and does music wake up memories more effectively than, say, reading or looking at pictures?
Music is a full brain activity. It really helps the brain to make connections or rebuild connections if they are not there. It helps neurons to fire together and help get back into some of those autobiographical memories if there's some brain damage somewhere. So music really works across the entire brain, which is something that really can lend itself to a lot of areas of rehabilitation and things like that, because it really can help to develop some new neural pathways or strengthen some neural pathways.
Yeah. So this is a physiological full brain exercise as opposed to a psychological full brain exercise, I assume you're saying, right?
Definitely, yeah.
And so the assumption is then that we can rebuild, make new connections, and eventually kind of recover from things sometimes through this kind of therapy.
Hopefully, yeah, definitely with physical rehabilitation, there's a lot of research, there's a whole practice of neurological music therapy, looking at gait training, so learning how to walk potentially after a stroke, and how we walk has a lot of rhythm to it, and utilizing the rhythm within music around them to help to develop a cadence that is comfortable and is safe for them, because so it really can help to build new connections and build back some connections.
And I understand also can be used to alleviate pain.
Yeah, definitely. I've worked in hospice care for a big part of my clinical career, and sometimes, pain meds aren't quite helping, and so music can provide an altered means of attention, shifting attention to something else for a while that may not, been away from their body for a time being. There's a practice in training kind of to a person's either heart rate or breath rate to try to match the music to what they're physiologically feeling, and in time hopefully help those to be more steady or to slow down if that's the need, to help to match. It's kind of like the metronomes you've ever seen where they put a ton of metronomes on the table and they eventually come together.
They do?
They do. If you find pendulum metronomes, there's videos out there.
Oh,
and they eventually all synchronize. It's kind of that same principle of playing the live music to somebody and trying to match to some physiological responses.
Interesting. So what are some of the songs, or what kinds of music have you used frequently?
Quite a variety. It truly depends on the individual. We really practice from patient-preferred music, client-preferred. There's really trying to understand what motivates you. And sometimes that might not be a specific song for someone. I think that's the most loaded question we can sometimes ask is, what's your favorite song? But understanding what preferences, what kind of music they like, can help us to create music that's motivating to engage with and to work on areas of functioning that, that they need to improve upon at that point.
So you kind of look for what's significant for the individual. But is there any music that you prescribe for certain situations?
I don't think there's any specific song or specific music I use for a certain need or diagnosis. It truly is focused on that individual and who they are and all their cultural elements around them.
So we have no advice for the audience. Like if you're feeling depressed, listen to Let It Be by the Beatles, or don't listen to Sunshine of Your Love by Cream.
Potentially,
okay. And then so there's some other applications, like for communication. What are the ways we deal with communication in music?
Communication is inherently musical. It has a cadence, a tempo to it. There's inflection and kind of a rise and fall within the melodic lines. And so we try to pull out or connect with those musical elements of speech. And there's many. One of the most famous case examples is Gabby Gifford, the senator who was she went through music therapy after her.
She was the shooting victim, right?
Yes, about 10 years ago or so, and how singing, working with a music therapist helped her to find singing and be able to have the ability to say I love you and have the ability to find speech again, and so that was a big part of her treatment plan.
So I know you spend a lot of time with hospice patients. Can you give us like what a session might be like? Can you think of maybe a particular session that you had that you thought was emblematic of what you do?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the hospice work because it was one of the few times in my clinical career where I could walk into a space and work with 4 generations, where I would have grandma who was maybe 104, and then the 2-year-old great-great-grandbaby in this space, and finding ways to bring in favorite music that connects the family to each other, and helping the children or who may be acting as caregivers to reconnect that loving relationship with their loved one. And I think those were some of the most fun, because the music would span a lot of different genres and eras, because I had to sometimes appease to the children, and then to the grandma, or then to the other family members in that space. So those were always a joy, and it felt as though it really became a piece of that family with them in that journey. And also, one specific family, I always called the granddaughter before I went, because the grandma loved to hear her sing, and so she always came with me to sing to her grandma, and that was just a very special experience for her to share a piece of her and connect when they weren't always aware of who she was. So it was a great way to have them continue to make positive memories at the end of life.
Yeah, and if they're not making the music, you come in with something, I assume, right? So you're the doctor who comes in with the boom box instead of a little black bag, is that?
Well, I always have a speaker on me, but actually music therapists we utilize a lot of live music. All music therapy students, they learn how to play guitar, piano, sing, and percussion. And actually flute was my primary instrument in college. So we come out as multi-musicians and having a lot of ways to self-accompany and sing, so that we can create music that's adaptable to the time and space, so that it truly matches with that person and can connect with them.
So if someone is really interested in playing guitar and they don't want to be a starving artist, they can enroll in a music therapy program and learn how to apply that and make a living at it, right?
Potentially, yeah. A lot of times music therapists teach of adaptive lessons for people who may have physical limitations to be able to play an instrument. For example, even just tuning the guitar to a chord where you don't even have to use your fingers is sometimes just enough to give someone a space to feel like they have a means of expression, and just allowing, opening up the possibilities and taking away any barriers that might be there.
Yeah. So the program that you teach in, if someone's enrolled in that, what kinds of things do they study?
Music therapy, so we have an undergraduate program, and the undergraduate students, they take a pretty wide range of courses, a lot of music classes, getting into music theory and oral skills, so understanding the ins and outs of how music works and be able to develop their ear, but also taking lessons on their primary instrument, whatever that be, voice or an instrument, music history courses, and then doing the whole music therapy sequence has intro to music therapy, just kind of that overview, clinical skills class, theory and knowledge courses, all the music skills classes like guitar and voice and percussion. They take a multicultural percussion course, and then beyond that, there's a lot of courses we take in the psychology department, biology, some anatomy and physiology, sociology, and really trying to understand that full person, because music therapy is a holistic practice, and trying to understand the whole person and how we can best serve them.
So who's your student? Are they mostly people interested in music, and a few people that come over from psychology or sociology? How's that work out?
We share a lot with psychology sometimes, whether they come to us first and then go to psychology or the other way. Most people come in with a background of music of some sort, whether they played in a band or orchestra or sang in high school. They've had some exposure to that to some level. A lot of times they're musicians who love that ability to connect with people through music, but don't necessarily want to teach or perform. Music therapists, while we create a lot of live music, it's not about just that one-way performance realm.
Yeah.
It's about when we create, we engage with other people and having that space to help somebody else. So it's a lot of helpers and musicians.
And for the musicians, they've got an audience of one, and they're getting direct feedback, right? So I can see how it's rewarding and therapeutic for them as well, probably, right?
It is a very rewarding, really rewarding profession. Really getting to step into some very delicate life moments with people,
sure.
and to provide something to brighten and better their day, wherever that might be.
Yeah. What's your most memorable experience like that?
I was present at the time of a transition, so when somebody actively died, and was there with a family, about 25 people around the bed, and just really, was providing music at that time, and music really became this container for the family to begin expressing and grieving, and
You were playing guitar?
guitar and singing. Yes, I was
yeah.
singing "Jesus Loves Me" was the song that was of choice for that family, and it was just a moment where I wasn't planning to go see them that day, and I happened to be there at that moment, and to sharing that with the family, and to be there immediately to support them through the next phase.
Good timing, yeah. So what's the history of this? How did this get started, and how's it evolved over the years?
Yeah, and as I said, music has been a part of human culture since it was
Right.
a thing.
Yeah, and we've all been self-medicating ourselves with music for centuries, right?
Definitely, and there's examples in the Bible. There's early examples of kings using music and hiring musicians to help them. But really, the professionalization of music therapy got its roots and momentum starting at the beginning of the 20th century, beginning of 1900. There was about a 50-year period where there's a lot of kind of grassroots efforts across. It started mostly up in New York, in that area, but quickly began to expand.
I wouldn't have associated this with New York. Right? If you told me California, Laurel Canyon, maybe New York, though.
Yeah,
that's
New
amazing.
York City was kind
I
of.
guess they need it the most.
It was kind of the beginning hub, and as the World War I and II began to expand the people's perspective of what music could provide within different settings, and then around 1950 was when we had our first academic programs, and our first music therapy registry or credential was in the 1950s.
So go back to World War I for a minute. Was this because of the troops coming back and needing to kind of help adjust and normalize themselves?
Yeah, the PTSD at that point was called shell shock.
Yes, it was. That's right. I never thought of that.
And so it provided a way. Initially, it was a means of entertainment, but beginning to see how this could provide a process of understanding the psychological challenges they were working through. Psychology was still fairly rudimentary at that point. Kind of early point of understanding there too. So it's providing a way to connect and give something that's not, and also that transition to humanity again after they've seen some pretty difficult things around the world.
So did somebody just discover this by observing that people were affected by the music they were listening to, or was it a theory that was put into action? How did it begin?
So in the 1800s, there were some physicians bringing music into some different institutions in different places, but there was no really consistent practice and no training. It was really when Eva Augusta Vescelius came to the scene around the 1890s, after she traveled both domestically and throughout the world as a vocalist with her sisters. They traveled as a trio and were performing, and she began to want something more than just the performance realm and looking for something else in her life, and beginning to understand the effects of that music has beyond that entertainment space. And she, with her experience of singing and playing in some hospitals and prisons as they were traveling, began to see how certain music provided a desired effect where others weren't, and seeing that there could be harm done if we don't think about the person before us and truly select music that was appropriate for them. So she actually, through many women's groups, gained a lot of leadership experience under the International Sunshine Society, and New York.
What was that? International Sunshine Society?
Yeah,
Really?
it was a philanthropic endeavor that was meant to paying forward kind deeds. It was started by a newspaper journalist who wanted to send cards, once you receive it, send it on and kind of pay something forward. And it quickly expanded into many other ways of service.
Kind of a general goodwill organization, right? And they tapped into the music.
Yeah, under that organization, Vescelius was able to establish the St. Cecilia Sunshine League. St. Cecilia is the patron saint of music. And she trained people in how to go into hospitals and prisons and asylums of the day to best apply music. So she was beginning to train, and a big piece was to reduce harm and how can we promote good and not do harm. And quickly after that establishment, she founded the National Society for Musical Therapeutics in 1903, and
way back in 1903.
1903,
wow.
Yeah, and they met pretty regularly throughout New York City through that time. She actually was able to purchase land just north of New York City and started a school in 1907, and really began setting some foundations of how to train people. And some of her first students were nurses, and then musicians, and really getting book knowledge, the book knowledge that we had at the time, as well as skills. And very quickly it grew. She established the first journal in 1913 for music therapy.
Yeah. So at that early stage, though, you said she was training nurses and doctors to do what? What initially was going on?
Providing live music and also selecting which music. Like you asked earlier, is there certain music for certain things? She had a prescriptive model. That was kind of an early thing. She went to a lot of classical music of the time and selected certain songs for fever versus other things. A bit different.
Really? That's interesting.
So that was kind of an early practice, but
like it was medicine, so this medicine for this, this medicine for that.
In a way, yeah.
Which isn't how you look at it today.
Not quite, but there were a lot of her practices that really carry over. She, again, that idea of not doing any harm.
Right.
She really focused on a relationship and in helping to, and wanting people to understand that we don't come in there as a performer. We're there building a human relationship with the person through the music.
So she wouldn't have played punk music under any circumstances.
No.
Do no harm.
Piano and well, they started to bring jazz in at that time when that was a little controversial. But again, I'm trying to understand what was the value of that for a person.
Yeah. And she was the topic of your dissertation, I think, right?
Yes, she was.
What are some interesting things you found out about her?
I found out there was way more out there than we ever thought was possible. I was interested in her when I took a history of, it started as a music, I first did a history of music education course and was like, I need to know more about the history of music therapy.
Sure.
Took that course and I learned of her and some other women at the early 1900s we weren't really talking about. The music therapy community often highlights that the founding of the first academic programs and everything that happened in the 1950s, and doesn't really talk about all this work that grew into that.
Yeah, when they were inventing it, right, essentially.
They were, and they were building off of each other. So I completed a pilot study just to understand. I wanted to know when her birthday was. That was what started with that one.
Really?
And I kept finding more and more, and I think the fascinating thing is there was so much accessible that had not been studied, and there's actually a scrapbook. Even with that, there was a challenge to find a lot of primary documents. She did not have any children, and I tried to trace down family lines to see if there's something in the family archives somewhere, and couldn't quite find that. But towards the later stages of writing my dissertation, I was contacted by the archivist with the National Music Therapy Association that a scrapbook had arrived, and she sent me pages, and there were signed letters with one of Eva Vescelius' sister's name on it. There was letterhead from physicians she had partnered with, and prints and everything. But I couldn't access it because had been damaged in Hurricane Sandy and was moldy.
Oh my!
But we just raised funds
That's an interesting story. Yeah.
So we just had raised some funds to get that mitigated, and it's actually off doing that right now. So I'm looking forward to just continuing to find more. So I think that is just the most interesting thing, that there was so much out there when I just started to look, and it's been kind of rippling out and having colleagues take on other figures and begin to see what more haven't we found out about this early movement towards professionalization of music therapy.
Well, that's good to know. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
That's all the time we have for our program. Thank you to Dr. Emily Sevcik for joining me today on the Roundtable Perspective. I'm Tom Roach. I'll see you next time.